Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on healthcare information data exchange standards. And we are going to talk about one of the most widely used and important data exchange standards that we have in the healthcare space today, which is HL7, Health Level 7 standards. We are going to do a little bit of introduction and overview of the standard and go over certain specific elements of the standard as well. And having said that, HL7 is very important for people to know in the health information management space because you might be directly involved in sending and receiving information from a variety of healthcare information systems in your career. Yeah, so let's get started. Okay, right. Kind of just taking a step back from HL7. So, and for a larger context, why do you think that we need to move data between different systems in healthcare? So I would urge you to put some thought into it and really kind of try to think about certain use cases that you actually encounter in your healthcare organizations or in your experience as a patient. And it might be that there may be different reasons to move healthcare data between different systems in healthcare. So take some few moments just to think through some of the use cases that you may have encountered as a healthcare professional or as a patient so far. And you can please feel free to type those in the chat, or if you want to speak up, just unmute and then please feel free to share your thoughts about why do we really need to move data between different systems in healthcare. So yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of good comments over the chat. And why don't I kind of move on to the next slide, which has a list of sort of typical use cases that why we might want to move data around between different systems and healthcare. Right from these are sort of some of the very typical use cases that we may encounter in various healthcare settings, right from inpatient, ambulatory, emergency, or any sort of clinic or alternative care settings. So if you are trying to transmit a clinical order to a specific person, for example, if you are placing an order for a diagnostic procedure for a CT scan MRI, so the order information needs to be transmitted to the X-ray or CT scan or diagnostic procedure related system as well. And probably once the order is completed, so the order details and the procedure details should come back to the care team who has placed the order as well. And also, you might need to share a list of allergies for a given patient. And it may be allergies or it may be something more from problems, diagnosis, or social determinants of health information might need to be shared from different systems, right from starting from a GP to a hospital to a clinic to a long term care center or to a home healthcare center as well. And number four is very typical, kind of when you walk into your GP and you are referred to a specialist, your GP usually creates a referral form, so which may be electronically faxed, or there are certain electronic referral management systems in place in certain provinces of Canada, like Ontario. They have this system called resource matching and referral. That's a electronic referral management system. So your order details and referral details may need to be transmitted from the system of the referring organization to the organization whom the case is being referred to, and also reporting metrics. So this is a pretty huge case, kind of every healthcare organization, irrespective of the volume they operate with or the size, they have to report certain metrics to the government agencies, including CAI and the provincial governments as well. So that includes sharing a large amount of data with a large amount of information to the kind of the government and healthcare agencies as well. So yeah, so these are sort of typical use cases why really we need to move data around different systems in healthcare. And this actually sets a very good context on why do we need a standard like HL7 and what does really HL7 mean, kind of from an healthcare interoperability standpoint. Okay, so my next slide is kind of these are the topics of learning that we are planning to cover in this session today. We are going to get started with a brief history of HL7 and the different versions that it offers as well. So the reason that you see version 2 here, because version 2 is the only version of HL7 that is most widely used by healthcare organizations across the world. That's why we are going to kind of do a little bit of deep dive on the version 2. And we are also going to understand exactly how does the HL7 standard operate in a real life context, kind of how healthcare data is transmitted from system A to system B using the HL7 standard, kind of what are the processes that are kind of really happening in the back end on this business process. And also, lastly, we are going to touch upon some of the HL7 message components and the structure of the message as well. How really, and this will help you to interpret an HL7 message going forward. It's no longer going to seem like kind of Greek and Latin and a bunch of numbers and characters in place. So yeah, so a lot of exciting and important topics here today. So moving on. This is a bit of history about HL7. So HL7 Health Level 7 is actually an international standards development organization that was really established in the year 1987 to enable interoperability of healthcare information. So right from 1987 to this day, the organization and the standards they have produced have really evolved and matured and refined. We are going to talk about more details in the upcoming slides, but really this is where it sort of started. And it was so the goal was creating a platform which was vendor agnostic and which would provide some kind of standard guidance and a method of moving data between different systems in the sort of the healthcare. Yeah, and so this is what, so HL7, as we really talked about, is a set of standards which is standard for communicating the healthcare data between different systems. And this standard has been approved by ANSI, which means that it has gone through all the rigorous processes and the checks and balances to ensure that the standard we have today is absolutely robust and something which kind of healthcare organizations across the world can actually trust this kind of messaging format and the data exchange format for really sharing and receiving data across healthcare systems and across healthcare organizations. And really what HL7 does is it provides a common language around kind of the content and structures for clinical data classes, like say, for example, diagnosis and allergies, problems, procedure, clinical notes. So all of these different components of clinical data classes, HL7 binds them into a common structure around for really so that kind of the data can be exchanged between electronic health record system or any system like PAC system or any system which handles healthcare data without any ambiguity or and risk of misinterpretation of healthcare data, which you may really appreciate that this is very important considering kind of misinterpretation of healthcare data might directly adversely impact the patient outcomes and patient safety as well. So that is the reason kind of HL7 has gone through all of these checks and balances to ensure that the standard is absolutely robust and absolutely has been validated by experts across the world. So there's a website, hl7.org, that has a wealth of information about the standard, about all of the standards, the histories, the nomenclature, the vocabularies, the terminologies that has been kind of really published so far. Most of the resource content in HL7 is really free. So I would highly encourage you to go to this website and have a look at what all the resources they have here. Right. This is a bit of continuation of a history of HL7 versions that has been published so far. So 1989 is the first time HL7 published the version 2 standards. So the reason you see 2.x is means that the version 2 started from version 2.2, and then the version has been evolved to and refined over the past many years. So now we have till version 2.9, which is the latest standard. So it has evolved from 2.2, 3, 4, 5, and going till sort of standard 2.9. And also in 2003, HL7 released a version 3 of messaging, which has not been very successful and not has not been really adopted by various organizations because the HL7 version 3 lacked a bit of clinical context. Although it was very technically sound, but there was a little bit of lacking on the technical context, which we can talk about in some other session. But the important thing to note here is that HL7 version 2 has been and is still being widely used across organizations. In 2005, HL7 released a clinical document architecture standard, which actually defines the structure of certain medical records. So CDA, clinical document architecture, is not exactly a data exchange standard, but it defines the structure of certain medical records, such as the discharge summaries, the progress notes, and kind of they sort of defined these kind of the document content structure, which helps to kind of which actually allows to have a better exchange of information between the patient and the care teams. And 2014, HL7 released a version, their latest version, which is really pretty forward thinking, which we call it as a FIRE version, and which is based on something called REST APIs. And this is particularly suited in a world of ours, like we have millions of healthcare apps. So it is FIRE allows you kind of share data and information very fast and very robust, and also by non-technical teams through a variety of apps and web services as well. So that is kind of really the core importance of the FIRE standard here. Okay, yeah, so I know kind of I am sort of really delivering a lot of content here. At any point, if you have any questions, please feel free to type over in the chat. I would be happy to take these questions at the end of the session. But if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to place it over chat. Okay, kind of going on. So this is a little bit of history on the HL7 version 2 standard, which I kind of said that this is the most widely used HL7 standard as of now. So version 2 was first published in 1989, and as the standard has matured, so a lot of fields has been deprecated. And for example, really in the past, the standard had fields like patient ID, social security number in case of the US context, and driver's license numbers and others in the patient identification segment. But now the standard has a field for the patient identifier that may repeat and that may sort of list of various identifiers. So the whole point of this version upgrades has been really to refine the HL7 version and to improve the HL7 version standards and to kind of include a lot of message and information content that has really evolved over the past few years. But here, the important stuff for us to know is HL7 version 2.3 is pretty mostly used till now in various organizations. And most of these versions have this backward compatibility as well. By backward compatibility, I mean that if there's a standard released, so that standard can also read the messages and interpret the messages of the previous versions as well, just to maintain a continuity of the standard. So this is what we mean by a backward compatibility of the standards. Okay, moving on here. So the next slide is pretty very interesting because kind of this helps us to understand the context in which HL7 is used. So this actually gives you the back-end process of what interoperability entails and showing the possible connection between the sender and the receiver systems. Interoperability actually is pretty complex, and this graphic helps us to understand what goes on in the backend when we are trying to send or receive data between different systems using the HL7 standard. So it starts with kind of the step zero, what we call is something in the real world causes the process to start. This is usually called as a trigger event. Now, once a trigger event is established, the step one is to for the sender, the sending system is to prepare the data for transport. This means they can extract the needed data and package it for transport. So next, the sender connects the receivers through a transport layer. So this step usually includes authentication, kind of the elements of the whole process. The third is the receiver gets the package of data and parses it. In the fourth step is which is step number four, is the receiver processes the data, applying the kind of the local business rule, the workflow engine rules as per the receiving system, right? And then number five is the receiver acknowledges the receipt of the package of data. So this is very important to know here that any message that is sent through the HL7 from the sending system to the through the receiving system, there is an acknowledgement which needs to be sent from the receiving system to the kind of the sending system to indicate the outcome, right? If there is no acknowledgement which is sent, it means that the data has not successfully gone through, which is usually captured in backend interface monitoring systems, which is a pretty standard function by most of the EHR systems as well. So yeah, so this is at a very high level how HL7 messaging message exchanges operate at the back end in between sending and receiving systems here. This is usually a seven step process, as is indicated in the graphic here. Okay. As I said, kind of you should take a moment, kind of really to understand the steps which is involved in this, which might seem pretty complex, but this picture I think does a good justice of trying to explain this in simple terms. So as I said, any questions drop in the chat, we can take it at the end later on. Right. So now we are going on to kind of really understanding one HL7 message. How does the HL7 message looks like? So in this slide, in the left hand is a sample of how the HL7 message will look like in real life. So this might seem like Greek and Latin to you, which is absolutely okay, because this is how I felt when I saw it for the first time. But important to know here is that one HL7 message is comprised of different segments. So as is mentioned here in the slide here, is that segments are sentences of the message. So as you see, a lot of text highlighted in red, MSH, PID, NK1, PV1, all of these are individual segments of the message. So we can break down one HL7 message into multiple segments, and each segment has a meaning. Inside each segment, you can have different data fields, and all of these data fields are separated by ASCII characters or XML tags. So each of these segments will contain different kinds of data, and each of these data fields might have different data type specs. So it might be numeric, it might be character, it might be alphanumeric, and things like that. So, and also important to note that all of these data fields, it might be required or optional based on the understanding between the sending and the receiving system. Right. So now, these are most commonly used message segments of HL7. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. There is more to it. I'm going to share some links at the end of our session. You can go through the link to have a look at the list of the most commonly used message segments of HL7. Right. And at the end, just to help us learn what we learned so far, I've got a couple of questions which you can try to answer through kahoot.com. So what is the most widely used HL7 version? Is it version 2 or version 3? So log into kahoot.com and type in your answers. I can see it live. So the correct answer is version 2. And the next question we have is HL7 are comprised of what? Is it data sets or segments? So the correct answer is segments here. So yeah, so I think we have reached the end of our session today here. I would be happy to take any questions and any further discussion areas that you all would like me to focus on. And if not, I have a list of links here for recommended reading. Please go through each of this content extremely valuable information about HL7 standard and also the various details and aspects of it. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of our session today. Thank you all very much for your time and attention, and I hope you found it very useful. As I said, I'm open to questions even after the class as well, so feel free to drop me an email or a chat. I would be happy to respond to your questions. Thank you very much. Have a good day to you all. Thank you. Bye.